In ancient times, Adam and Eve, the first human beings created by God, had two sons, Cain and Abel. The firstborn Cain became a farmer, while Abel, the younger, devoted himself to herding sheep. Despite the differences in their occupations, both brothers shared the love and responsibility to serve and honor God. As the brothers grew, so did their love and devotion to God. Both were aware of the importance of honoring and serving the Creator, and each sought to do so through his abilities and talents. As children of Adam and Eve, the first human beings created by God, they understood that they were part of a greater divine plan. One day, while contemplating the beauty of creation and remembering the story of their parents in the Garden of Eden, Cain and Abel decided to offer sacrifices to God. They wanted to express their gratitude and devotion to the Creator, who had given them life and taught them to live in harmony with nature. Cain worked hard in his fields, carefully choosing the most lush and beautiful fruits and vegetables he had grown. He was proud of his work and believed that his offering would be a symbol of his love and loyalty to God. On the other hand, Abel went into his flock and selected the purest and most perfect lamb, symbolizing innocence and goodness. Abel knew that God valued sincerity and humility, and wished to offer a sacrifice that reflected his devotion and respect. The day came when both brothers presented their offerings to God. Cain, with his basket overflowing with fruits and vegetables, and Abel, with the purest and most perfect lamb from his flock. Both brothers knelt and raised their offerings to heaven, hoping that God would accept their sacrifices and bless their lives. However, God looked at the offerings of both and was pleased with Abel's sacrifice, but did not show the same pleasure for Cain's offering. The sincerity and humility behind Abel's sacrifice touched God's heart, while Cain's offering, though generous, did not reach the same level of devotion. Seeing that God did not show the same pleasure for his offering, Cain felt disappointment, and sadness invaded his heart. He could not understand why his sacrifice had not been accepted equally, and discontent began to brew within him. Envy and jealousy towards his brother Abel mingled with his insecurities, fueling the anger growing within him. Cain could not help but compare his life to that of Abel. Although they both worked hard at their respective jobs, Cain could not manage to feel the same satisfaction as his brother. The happiness and love that Abel radiated in his relationship with God and his flock only served to increase Cain's resentment. The rift between the brothers deepened as anger and envy consumed Cain. God, seeing how Cain's heart was darkening, decided to intervene. He appeared to him and asked him why he was so angry and grieved. God warned him that anger was like a lurking beast, ready to devour him if he failed to master it. He urged him to reflect on his actions and seek reconciliation with his brother. Cain listened to God's words, but instead of finding comfort in them, he felt his anger and bitterness grow even greater. He convinced himself that God had treated him unjustly, and this belief fanned the flame of envy toward his brother Abel. As the days passed, Cain became immersed in his dark thoughts, allowing anger and jealousy to consume him completely. The relationship between the brothers became strained and distant, and Cain drifted further and further away from his family and God. It was at that moment that the seed of evil germinated in his heart, and the brotherly love he once felt for Abel turned into uncontrollable hatred. The days continued to pass, and the relationship between Cain and Abel became increasingly strained. The hatred and envy Cain felt for his brother grew like a dark shadow, poisoning his mind and clouding his judgment. Abel, on the other hand, continued to devote himself to his flock and sought to maintain peace between them, unaware of the storm brewing in his brother's heart. One evening, as the sun began to set on the horizon, Cain decided that the time had come to confront his brother. He invited Abel for a walk in the countryside, away from the prying eyes of his family. Abel accepted the invitation, hoping that this encounter might be the beginning of reconciliation between them. As they walked together, Cain struggled to contain the anger boiling inside him. He watched his brother and could not help but feel that God had favored him unjustly. Instead of finding comfort in Abel's presence, Cain became convinced that his brother was the cause of all his troubles and suffering. When they reached a secluded place, Cain, blinded by anger and hatred, could no longer restrain himself. Suddenly, he attacked his brother, striking him with force and fury. Abel, surprised and terrified by Cain's violence, tried to defend himself, but was unable to stop his brother's unbridled fury. With each blow, Cain let his anger and envy be unleashed on his brother, believing that in doing so, he would finally find the peace and acceptance he so longed for. But instead of calming his heart, the act only served to deepen his pain and despair. Finally, Abel fell to the ground, defeated and lifeless. His blood mingled with the earth that had witnessed his love and devotion to God. In that instant, Cain realized the magnitude of his sin and the darkness that had invaded his soul. But it was too late, and the first murder in the history of mankind was consummated. The evening began to give way to night, and Cain lay beside the lifeless body of his brother. The weight of guilt and remorse overwhelmed him, and the magnitude of his sin left him breathless. Abel's blood cried out from the earth, a constant reminder of the betrayal and violence he had unleashed. God, aware of the terrible act Cain had committed, appeared to him and asked for Abel's whereabouts. Cain, trying to conceal his crime, answered evasively, "Am I my brother's keeper?" God, upon learning the truth, told Cain that his brother's blood cried out from the earth and that, as punishment, he would be condemned to wander the earth without rest and any harvest. The earth, which had witnessed the blood of Abel, would no longer bear fruit for Cain. He would be a wanderer, an outcast, far from the divine presence and protection he once enjoyed. God's punishment fell upon Cain like an unbearable weight. Not only had he lost his brother by his hand, but he had also lost God's blessing and favor. Despair and regret flooded him, and he mourned his fate, realizing that his actions had condemned him to a life of loneliness and suffering. Cain begged God for mercy, fearing that his punishment would make him a target for the vengeance of those who would find him in his wanderings. But God, though angry and disappointed, did not allow Cain to suffer beyond what was necessary. He imposed on him a mark that would protect him from harm and ensure that no one would dare to kill him. Thus, Cain was banished from his home and family, and condemned to wander the earth as an eternal reminder of the consequences of hatred and envy. The story of Cain and Abel became a lesson for all future generations, a call for reconciliation and brotherly love, and a grim reminder of the dangers of allowing dark feelings to control our hearts. Cain, marked and banished, began his life as a wanderer, estranged from the presence of God and the community of his loved ones. Each step he took him further away from what was once his home and plunged him into a world of loneliness and suffering. The mark that God had imposed on him constantly reminded him of his sin and the destiny he had chosen by allowing himself to be driven by anger and envy. As the years passed, regret and remorse grew in Cain's heart. He began to understand the true magnitude of his sin and to recognize the harm he had caused his brother and his family. Guilt tormented him day and night, and Cain's mark became a reminder of his need for redemption and forgiveness. Although he was destined to wander the earth and live in solitude, Cain never stopped seeking God's forgiveness and mercy. He spent his days meditating on his actions and how his life had been transformed by hatred and envy. Cain's mark became a symbol of his quest for redemption and a reminder of God's grace, which, despite his sin, had protected him from even greater punishment. Eventually, Cain founded a city named Enoch in honor of his firstborn son, and his descendants continued his legacy. Despite his life as a wanderer and outcast, Cain sought to right his wrongs and teach his children about the dangers of allowing dark feelings to control their hearts. His story became a warning to all, a reminder of the importance of brotherly love and the need to always seek forgiveness and reconciliation. Cain's mark, over time, became a symbol of God's mercy and justice. Despite his sin, Cain was never completely abandoned by the Creator. This story teaches us that even in our worst actions, God still seeks our redemption and our reconciliation with Him and with our brothers.